Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to Norway Chess 2022. This tournament being held in Stavanger with many of the world's best players going toe-to-toe in classical chess for 3 points, followed by an Armageddon if the game ends in a draw. I'm uploading this video much later than usual. Today has been a very strange day in my life. I have just felt like my whole face has been super swollen, like eyes itchy, super tired, just could not wake up at all the entire day. And normally that's allergies, but I took my allergy medication today, but I still just feel absolutely horrible. So I don't know if there's any, YouTube comment doctors out there that have any ideas. Probably will go get a blood draw with my wife to see if I'm deficient in anything, but man, I don't know, it just felt awful today. So I'm drinking some kefir, very good, by the way, for you. Also I tried to go to the gym today and I walked in and there was some chemical smoke and the fire alarm went off. So it was a great day. Yeah, so today's video is called about confessing because they put a very cool feature, which I hadn't seen before. It's called a confessional booth. So Magnus and a couple other players went to the confessional booth during the games and spoke their thoughts to the live audience. The other players obviously couldn't hear them. So Carlsen begins against Mamedyarov with knight f3 and goes for a fianchetto setup with the d4. So kind of playing a potential Catalan. And this is known as the Neo-Grunfeld, but it's got a Catalan-esque structure because White played the first 6 moves of the Catalan, just in a slightly different setup. Mamedyarov plays c6, and here there are many lines by White. Sometimes White puts the knight on e5, sometimes White plays queen b3. Magnus plays a very provocative approach, which is knight c3, just completely giving away the c4 pawn. So if Black were to take this pawn and then go b5, Black would say, I'm up a pawn. White would say, you have given me the entirety of the center, right? I have more center space. I have very long-term kind of complicated pressure. And b5 is, I think, the main line. And then many games have been played. But Mamedyarov goes for a different approach here, which is putting the bishop on g4 and then taking this knight because it has no other way to go. And then playing this move e5. This is another variation where Black gives back a pawn, but then immediately wins it back with knight d7. And the interesting thing about this approach, this is when Magnus went into the confessional booth for the first time. And he said something along the lines of over the last year or two when I've been learning the Catalan, I'm paraphrasing because he was speaking in Norwegian, they had to translate it. He was happy that Mamedyarov played this approach because Magnus has been studying the intricacies of the Catalan, and he knows that in many of these positions White gets compensation for the pawn in the form of something. Sometimes you have the bishop pair, which is what you have in this game. Sometimes you have you have just a slight nagging pressure. And it's a very kind of mythical concept in the Catalan of what exactly this pawn here is worth for White. And if you're going to trust anybody to navigate the complexity of a position, it's a guy like Magnus, right? So Mamedyarov does go for this approach. And then Magnus here gives away yet another pawn. So he gives away the e-pawn to damage and split the structure, right? So kind of creating this situation here. Bishop e3. And now moving the bishop back to g2. So again, White is down a pawn. Black has 7 pawns, White has 6, but White has the bishop pair. And again, White has a very mysterious something. At some point, White will go queen e2, maybe bring the rooks to the open file. Maybe White will play f4, e5 to completely lock out these 2 pieces and pressure this way. So it's really up to Black to figure out what to do here. Mamedyarov plays knight a6 here and just doesn't even defend the c4 pawn. So he tries to get activity, right? He activates his knight on c2. Magnus here has to play a little tactical resource. He plays knight d5, danger levels, right? And wins the knight here, so takes. d4, bishop d2. Now, another interesting moment. Magnus here went to the confessional booth once again, and he said, Shahryar played this very intriguing approach. He gave me back a pawn, in turn activating all of his pieces. And Magnus said something completely just mind-blowing here to me. I know I treat him like a cow sometimes, Magnus. I milk him, with my for the YouTube algorithm to get some clicks. But at the end of the day, when he sometimes says things that are very, very fascinating. So Magnus said that on the 19th move, his preparation had been to play bishop f4. 19 moves in a position that has never happened before. Like, I think we had to go 14 moves. Like, this was the first new move of the game, Queen e2. I think earlier maybe f4 had been played. And then he knows all of this, because these are all kind of natural-looking moves by both sides. And so Magnus goes, yeah, you know, my note said bishop f4, but I thought that looked wrong, so I played bishop d2 over the board. And the more I let Stockfish run on this position, the more it thinks bishop d2 is the better move. So if Magnus is telling the truth that his notes are like, he's not misremembering, his notes are bishop f4, this dude literally played a move that was better than his preparation, which obviously had top-level engine analysis. What? Magnus is at the level he can suggest moves to the engine, and the engine goes, oh, really? I don't know why the engine is British. It's just a sophisticated accent, you know? Oh, really? That's fascinating, Watson. Anyway, bishop f4, yeah, I mean, he goes back to d2, and we have a very imbalanced game. So black obviously has a pass pawn that can be protected. White is going to try to figure out what to do with these 4 on 3. You know, do you play f4 e5? Like, if you give white a couple of moves in a row, white is going to go like this, and white is much better here. Like, completely winning, right? But that's not going to happen. So rook c8, queen b3, knight c5, black gets activity, queen a3. And Magnus is still pressuring, but Mamedyarov is doing a good job defending. Now here Magnus plays a very interesting idea. He plays z5. So he is now sacrificing a third pawn. This is the third pawn of the game that he's just giving up to Mamedyarov. You say, why didn't Magnus play f4 before going e5? Maybe he didn't like a5, because at this point, if you play it, there might be rook f d8 like this, and this queen maybe a little bit, I don't know. He decided to do it in a more forcing way to play down the center lines. So e5, rook e1, and now Magnus is plus 0.3, which engines at plus 0.3, think about that. You're up 3/10 of a pawn, but you're down a pawn, which means you've got a pretty big advantage, right? Bishop back to g7, b4 now, energetic move, kicking around the knight. We trade, and we just slide the queen over, targeting that weakness. Targeting the weakness that we created half the game ago when we played the move e6, splitting our opponent's structure. So as the game develops and white gets this mythical something of the Catalan, now we have that pawn under attack, and Mamedyarov gives it away again, hides his king. Mamedyarov is up to the task. I mean, he is fighting on, and he's making Magnus kind of work hard, even though white has an advantage here with the bishop pair and the smarter pawn structure, the 2-1-3, very clean structure. It's not the easiest thing in the world to play this position, but black's defenses are stretched very thin. You know, the pawns are all kind of moving, right? They're all kind of potential targets in the long run. This pawn, it's not really clear if it's an asset or a liability for black just yet. And so Magnus just has to stir the pot a little bit. He's just got to keep it moving, right? Bishop d3. He's now sacked the 4th pawn, by the way. 4th pawn. Can we just... A 4th pawn has been given away by Magnus. 4 of his 8 pawns during this game were just taken, picked off. Now he does that for the purpose of activating his pieces. He will win back a5, so it's a sacrifice, you know, like this. Now he's creating pressure here, right? h5 is a massive problem that's on the way. So black has to play h5. Now the a5 pawn has been won, and the pressure is slowly building. And probably Stockfish would defend this position with black, but I mean, Mamedyarov is not Stockfish. He's trying to defend, but time is ticking. Queen e6, queen b7, knight d6, queen c6, and now here comes the move. Mamedyarov plays queen b3. If you take my knight, I take your bishop. But he completely, I guess, overlooks with low time. Bishop takes g6. It's check. I give away the bishop with a tempo. Now I win back the knight, and I swarm you. And the reason that white is winning here, 2 reasons, okay? Number 1, the bishops are kind of the same color. So in all, not kind of, they 100% are of the same color. But what I mean by that is, if there ever was a queen trade, like, I know I'm making ridiculous moves, but this endgame is much more winnable because the bishops are of the same color. Okay, if the bishops were of opposite color, black would have nothing to worry about. So that's number 1, like at the end of the day. But number 2 is this king is so weak. And because of that, you're able to create a million types of different threats. And the position is so split, but the king is so open. Magnus's king is so safe. And that's another benefit of this Catalan structure. That white king stays safe in all the long runs. all right? And Magnus defends his king, coordinates his queen and bishop. King is just totally safe on h3, picks up the second pawn with check on f7. He's, Marmedyarov just resigned here. He didn't really feel like continuing the game. This pawn will be picked off, but even if it's not picked off in a moment, it will be just won in the long run. And Magnus wins for a third time in Classical. He wins yet again with a Catalan, and he is now 2870 on the live rankings. All right? He's 19 points away from the highest rating ever achieved. This dude in the Catalan, it's not fair. It's just not fair. It's not fair. It's not fair. Have I mentioned that it's not fair? So very interesting to hear his thoughts in the middle of the game. Everything from improving on his own preparation to, you know, talking about the fact that he has still stuff to learn. Like, even the world champ is still actively learning the intricacies of certain openings. Kind of this proving the mysterious concept of compensation specifically in the Catalan. So just super cool to hear that stuff. Don't go anywhere, because the rest of these games, not all of them, but a good amount of these games are really interesting. Rajabov and Topalov drew their Classical game. And then we had a semi-Slav, one of the most complicated openings in existence. In the playoffs, Bishop G5, and this DC G5 B5 setup. By the way, do you see the structure? Similar structure as we saw in the last game, right? Potentially, but not exactly. I love kefir, by the way. I know I said that. Probiotics, very important. Gut health is everything. Bishop E2, Bishop B7. And a super complex fight. I mean, white is winning the battle in the middle with a4 targeting this. This knight can come here, or knight d2, knight e4 can go. Black is not too keen on doing this because that just opens up the rook. That might happen, but not yet. And let's keep in mind that white is the favorite in the Armageddon, right? I mean, until they give a little bit more clock time to black, white is the favorite. Now, objectively speaking, white has not a lot of compensation for that pawn. That pawn that was given away on c4 early. So this is not a Catalan-esque position. This is a semi-Slav position. A Catalan position, the bishop would be there. So after like rook e1 and long castles, black's just the pawn up. However, black has less time to navigate the complexities of the position, and now Rajabov begins beating down that queen side, right? Bishop f1, g4, here comes Topalov, all right? Rook c8, d5, insane game. White is marching down the middle. This knight is holding to get at the king side. The queen side is wide open. The eval of this position is -3, which is kind of nuts. Yeah. Let's see what happens here. But let's also keep something in mind. Black doesn't have to win. Black can just make a draw, right? So Topalov now. Oh, this is real bad. This is real bad. That king is not feeling safe. That rook is now paralyzed. Queen comes into d4. Everyone has been put on notice. All 5 of these pieces have been put on notice by the queen. Now 1 pawn has been taken. And something tells me Rajabov is not having a great time here. Not only is he down 2 pawns now, he's no longer down 1 pawn. He's now down 3 pawns. His king is also feeling the heat a little bit. And yeah, this structure just survives. There is nothing that white is able to do here in terms of the attack. And Topalov is a class act. He doesn't even play for a win. He just forces a draw. He forces a draw up 4 points because a win is a draw. A draw is a win in the Armageddon for black. So probably the most convincing game by black so far in any of the Armageddons. Super, super convincing. And this just goes to show you, you know, in the Catalan structure, when the bishop is on g2, it's a totally different story than the Catalan... Well, then the queen's pawn positions where black wins the pawn on c4, and then white just doesn't like handle the position in the best way. Like white kind of slow played here, didn't get his compensation. Black got the bishop pair, the extra pawn, and the safer king. So black had the pawn and the compensation, as they say, and then just, yeah, I mean, Rajabov tried to throw a punch, but his feet were sideways. You know, he wasn't in fighting position. He tried to throw a punch with his feet. Both fit like, yeah, it's not gonna, right? You gotta land the lead jab, come over the top. So a really nice game from Topalov, a fun game, but obviously Armageddon is always full of blunders that you wouldn't see in Classical. Giri Anand began with b3. By the way, this is also an Armageddon game. The rest of the round was decided in Armageddon. This is really funny that Giri goes for b3. And Anand plays a very professional variation. He plays a6. This is a very annoying line. The point of a6 is that if you play knight c6, white can play bishop b5. And this is known to be a bit annoying, because this bishop doesn't really have anywhere else to develop. So what it will do is it will trade itself off, and then white will get very good control of the e5 square. And this is just something that white likes. And by playing a6 and then knight c6, you know, you kind of force white to play d4, bishop d3, and now we're just in a very boring queen's pawn position where black has no problems. But Anish plays bishop e2. So he plays an even bigger sideline. And then here, Anand is like, yeah, you didn't play d4 yourself, bozo, so now I'm going to play d4. And that is the top recommended engine move, and it really is just a problem for white to deal with. This is just no good. Rook e1, and I mean, Giri stalls a little bit. Now he tries to trade some pieces and just get us into a rather timid middle game, but not a whole lot is happening here. And as I've discussed, white can stall out the clock on black, right, in a lot of these Armageddons, especially in relatively boring positions. But if black can just play relatively effortless moves, like this is not a position you can stall out, because it's kind of open. And Anand also is on form. You're not going to stall out the clock on Anand, who very quickly takes over the initiative. He trades pieces, okay? Here he's inviting Giri to double his structure and create some imbalance. Giri's like, nah, I'm going to trade, I don't know. He doesn't even, now Anand moves the bishop out of the way. Then here plays a very nice tactical idea, knight c5. You can't take the bishop because I take this. And if you take this, then I move my bishop out of danger. And now Anand takes over. He gives away his bishop pair. Oh, sorry, not his bishop pair. He gives away his bishop and just plays a5. And Vishy in 20 moves is better with black. Down 3 minutes, better with black. And now I'm sure Giri's like, God, how does that? And he trades rooks, trades the knight, and now that rook is open on the a file. That pawn is a problem. The knight is just better than the bishop. It's just better than the bishop. And yeah, Anand, it doesn't matter that he's not got enough time to start the game because he's not worse at all. Look at his position. I mean, rook and knight are dominating white's rook and bishop. Just absolutely dominating. F5, H6, G5, rook D3, and you shut it down. That's it. I mean, black can absolutely never lose this position. Anand would beat most of us in this position with his eyes closed. Well, against Giri, he might not win with his eyes closed, but he will at least draw with his eyes closed. And the players just begin shuffling. Giri realizes there's not a whole lot going on. Anand says, all right, boss, let's go. Let's bring it home. And the players just repeat moves. It is a totally winning position for black, which is kind of hilarious. It's -3 according to Stockfish. So black just gets a perfect game, and Anand wins his Armageddon matchup to remain in second place behind Magnus. Only second place because Magnus won the classical portion. The next game that I have for you is Wang Hao versus MVL. Wang Hao goes for a London in the Armageddon, which is, all right, let's see how MVL plays against this. He plays a King's Indian style with D6, C5, and Queen B6 with a fianchettoed bishop, right? This is, but white is obviously not going to lose any pawns here. Normal developing stuff. And now MVL begins a fight. He trades, attacks the bishop, and goes here. And these pieces are ready for the move E5, and that's exactly what he plays after rook C8 and a couple of exchanges. So Wang Hao trades knights, Queen B6, and now we have E5, the move that is supported by the majority of the pieces in the black position. Wang Hao takes on E5. White is hoping for this and losing the bishop. Shockingly, MVL doesn't hang a piece in one move. He goes knight takes E5. And now lines are beginning to open. This is very Grunfeld-esque by black to have this bishop, kind of the pressure on the queen side. Maybe the knight is going to come to C4 at some point. Objectively speaking, position is 0.00. Subjectively speaking, MVL probably much prefers to play here because he likes these positions, right? So bishop to E6, and now the bishop goes to C4 to serve as a hook, right, for the knight to get into the white position. Knight E5 here is a good move by white, and I guess MVL just wanted to improve his structure, but Wang Hao goes here, and MVL just begins kind of like this approach here where he slides back with the queen, and then he's like, yeah, your queen's a bit offside. Boop. Yeah, trade queens with me, Wang Hao. Wang Hao's like, man, I don't really want to trade queens. Queen A3 and knight D3. So how many moves in a row has that been? 1, 2, 3 moves forward. All right. This is a trade, so I guess that counts. 5 in a row, we're making forward progress. 6 in a row, we're making forward progress. And here we have to go back just for a brief moment. But the idea is, you know, we got ideas over here potentially. The knight maybe wants to go to e4 and g3. And MVL ends this game like this. Queen d5, queen b4, boom. Wang Hao resigns. Wow. Wow. Two really convincing games. The point is that this is mate. The other point is that if you go here and queen d1 and you go king f2, knight d3 and the fork. Super game by MVL. I mean, great game by MVL, turning up the speed there toward the end with the big initiative. And yeah, amazing game from MVL. And if you had the patience to hang out with me until minute 20 of this recap, then do I have an interesting game for you. So, Wesley, Tari Aryan played a Queen's Gambit decline transposition with the c5. So this is known as the Tarrasch defense. And a variation here that Dubov popularized some years ago. Black historically here has played bishop e7. Dubov said, I'm going to take on d4, and I'm going to hit your knight, go here, and give you the d5 pawn. Now, it's been proven here that taking the d5 pawn really doesn't lead to much of an advantage for white. Black gets extremely active pieces, so white has turned to moves like knight a4, going for the bishop, castles, like many hundreds of games played here by the top guys. But Wesley decides, I'm going to challenge Tari's theoretical knowledge in knight takes d5. Wesley knows that is not the move for the advantage, but Wesley also knows it's a good opportunity to put some pressure on his opponent who has 3 minutes less, right? So we have bishop e6, which is the best move. White defends the knight with e4. Now we can see the point, right? Black, for the price of one pawn, has all the pieces playing. Bishop g4. Now, to the untrained eye, it looks like you can play knight f6 check, queen f6, and queen takes g4. To the mildly trained eye, queen f2, king d1, and queen takes g2, and black is completely winning, okay? So you can't do that. But after bishop g4 in the database, the only move in this position that really poses any problems to black seems to be queen c2. Wesley plays this move. That's never been played. Which means that Wesley, I don't think Wesley sat down at this game and improvised this move. This is a move, blocking your bishop, that is intending to put pressure on your opponent's knowledge of the position. It means that Wesley has studied this, and he knows the best moves. Black takes on d5, and here Wesley plays e takes d5. E takes d5, according to the machine, is not the best move. But you have to know why. Because of check. Okay, but now king f1! So Wesley just hangs on to this pawn. He's like, you know what? Are you going to find all the best moves? The best move here for black is castles. If you take the knight, your back rank gets exposed. So you can't take the knight after castles. And probably Wesley would have had to kick out the bishop. And then bishop h5. And then maybe Wesley would have attacked the queen. And then queen e6. And then Wesley would have walked his king over here. But by the time he did that, this pawn would have been lost. And, you know, Tari would have probably been in the driver's seat. I don't exactly. Wesley probably took a little bit of a gamble here. But Tari castled long. And that move, despite looking more natural and immediately pinning the queen, loses. It's now a completely winning. I think it's a much better position for white after long castles. I think h3 and the way Tari played this with bishop f5, he got into a lot of trouble. I guess he didn't play bishop e6. He was worried about. I don't know what he was worried about with the move bishop e6. But after bishop f5 and this, Wesley sacrificed the queen. So let's just back up real quick. If Wesley had played queen f4 in this position, he would have just been winning. Okay, so Wesley would have been in a winning position after the move queen f4, because the bishop is hit, the knight is hit. But if the bishop moves out of the way, you got to be a little careful. Don't blunder checkmate in literally one move. You would have to play like maybe queen g4 check to cover mate. Okay, you can also play bishop e3 to trade and bring the rook to cover the back rank before you go here, right? So you would have been winning. None of that happens. Okay, none of that happens. Instead of that, Wesley gives away his queen. What? He just sacks the queen to take the pawn with check, and now this. Now, for a brief moment, white is up 1 point of material, but the count is rook, knight, 2 pawns for a queen, okay? Black plays a6. Tari here had to play bishop e4 to trade the bishop and win the pawn, okay? And if rook to e1 pinning him, he just obviously takes the bishop. I'm not exactly sure why Aryan didn't play bishop e4. I suppose he didn't like something, you know, I would imagine. But now rook e1, there is no bishop e4, and Wesley just walks his king out of danger to h2. Now, you could still take on f2, but the king's not in a lot of danger, okay? Bishop c3, and rook f1, and knight d4, and yeah, I mean, it's trouble here. Knight c6 is coming, b8 is going to be a huge threat, rook f7, the rooks are getting in, and he is completely winning. Takes, king hides on b8 for a brief moment, but it's going to be a short-lived one because Wesley continues smashing. Rook takes bishop. If you take back, then there is check here and check. Well, repetition of moves. I'm going to pick up the pawn. I don't know why Wesley did this. This was like, why did it? There was no need to repeat moves. I think Wesley could have won here with rook f7 to go b8. I don't exactly see why rook... What's so wrong about this move? Like rook b8, there is mate. I don't know. Can the king? I don't know. I mean, you could always win like this. You could get rook and 2 bishops versus the queen. It's completely winning. Wesley decides to go like this, and then check, and then check. And I mean, he repeated moves, and then he played rook f7, and yeah, now he did it this way. So he got himself one more pawn, and yeah, Wesley winning the Armageddon in style. I mean, his king is just completely safe, and Tari resigns. Fascinating game. Fascinating game, fascinating day after 7 rounds of action at Norway Chess. Shocking, but Magnus Carlsen is in first place. Anand is in second. I mean, it's just incredible. Anand in second place, only losing 1 matchup to Wesley. So, yeah, super, just amazing. I'll see you all for round number 8. Get out of here.